Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a moment to honor the American icons we've recently lost, along with other cherished figures who left their mark on the world. If this video means something to you, a like goes a long way. It helps us keep creating these tributes with the sincerity they deserve. Thank you, truly. Now, let's get into it. Don Schlitz passed away at the age of 73. The name might not stop you in your tracks right away, but the moment someone mentions the gambler, everything clicks. His passing was announced without fanfare. No grand statements. Just a quiet goodbye for a man who spent his entire career making sure other people got to shine. In the late 1970s, when country music still prized a good story over a polished production, Schlitz wrote something that would outlast nearly everything else from that period. Kenny Rogers recorded it in 1978, and just like that, a late-night conversation between strangers on a train became a permanent piece of American culture. If you were alive during that era, you carry it with you. The radio humming in the background, long stretches of highway, that weathered voice telling you exactly when to hold and when to walk away. But Schlitz was never a one-hit wonder. He wrote consistently for decades, quietly steering the direction of country music through the 80s and well into what came after. More than 20 number one hits. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a craftsman who understood people. Those who spent time with him in the studio or around Nashville said he had a particular habit: he listened. Really listened. He watched the room, filed away small moments, and then transformed them into lyrics that felt like something you'd already lived. Like a memory you forgot you had. He never chased celebrity. He stayed close to home, close to the people who mattered. And that rootedness, that refusal to perform outside of his work, is probably exactly why his songs still hold up. They were never trying to impress. They were trying to be honest. And somehow, they still are. Little Richard has passed away at 87. Even saying it out loud feels strange, because for so long he seemed like someone who simply couldn't be contained by something as ordinary as time. Those close to him confirmed the news gently, soft words about a man who was never soft when the moment called for something bigger. If you heard those records in the 1950s, or even stumbled across them decades later, you don't forget the jolt of it. Tutti Frutti. Long Tall Sally. That piano landing like a thunderclap. That voice, unrestrained, exhilarated, almost confrontational. Nothing on the radio sounded remotely like it. Music at that time was shifting, but carefully, gradually. And then Little Richard walked in and tore through the caution entirely. He wasn't just swept up in the birth of rock and roll, he helped build the foundation. Before any of it had a name, before the industry knew how to package rebellion and sell it back to people, he was already there. Full makeup, bottomless energy, a stage presence that seemed to exceed what the room could physically hold. Some people were confused. Others couldn't take their eyes off him. Away from the lights, he was a more complicated figure than the performance suggested. Deeply spiritual, he stepped away from music more than once, returned, wrestled openly with questions of identity and faith and purpose. People who encountered him backstage often described something unexpected, a thoughtfulness, a stillness, almost a gentleness that the performance never hinted at. But the moment he touched the keys, all of that receded. And what remained was pure electricity. Go back and listen now. It still feels immediate. Not like an artifact. Not like something preserved in amber. Like it just happened. Some voices don't announce themselves. They linger at the edges of your awareness for a while, and then one day you realize they've been there all along. Engelbert Humperdinck was never quite that simple, though. Before the name, before the stillness under the spotlights, he was Arnold, born in 1936 in Madras, a long way from the England he'd eventually become associated with. Heat, distance, the feeling of belonging somewhere between two worlds. Then Lester, post-war, practical. A father who believed in steady work, not stage dreams. Music crept in rather than arriving with any kind of declaration. Early shows were small and forgettable, rooms where the background noise competed with the songs, nights where you couldn't be sure anyone was paying attention. Then illness stopped everything. Tuberculosis in the mid-1960s. Not cinematic. Just slow and limiting and frightening in the specific way that only a sick performer understands, when the instrument you depend on is your own body, and your body is no longer cooperating. He admitted later that there were days when the idea of singing again felt genuinely out of reach. Something changed when he came back. Partly the name, Engelbert Humperdinck, impossible to overlook, impossible to mispronounce without effort. But more than that, it was a quality in the way he carried himself. More grounded. Quieter in his certainty. Not because he'd become fearless, but because he'd already been close to losing everything, and now each step forward meant something different. By 1967, everything tilted. Release Me wasn't engineered for the kind of impact it had. It arrived and simply spread: radios, living rooms, cars where people stayed parked a little longer just to hear it through to the end. That same week, the Beatles were dominating the conversation. And somehow, he didn't get swallowed. He just stood his ground. Softly, without spectacle. And people noticed. But fame flattens people. To most of the world, he became the image, the voice that made women lean in, the romanticism that husbands pretended not to understand. It worked. Of course it worked. Still, the full picture was always more than that. Tours took their toll. Cities bled into each other. And back home, there was Patricia, present, steady, largely invisible to the public but quietly central to everything else. He wasn't without fault. He's never suggested otherwise. Long absences, choices that cost more than he understood at the time. Fame rarely presents the invoice up front. The 1970s brought new sounds, faster movements, a whole new generation of faces. He adjusted where it felt natural and stopped where it didn't. He didn't follow every trend. And strangely, that stubbornness kept people close. Not because he reinvented himself endlessly, but because he remained recognizable. The quieter chapter came in 2021. Patricia was gone, taken slowly by Alzheimer's over years, the kind of departure that happens gradually, piece by piece, until one day she no longer knew his face. He said it plainly, without embellishment: there were days she didn't recognize him. That single sentence says more than any long explanation could. To stand before someone who shared your entire life and watch yourself vanish from their memory while you're still in the room, that's a specific kind of grief. And still, he kept going. Not dramatically. Not with reinvention. He just didn't stop. Watch him perform now and there's a pause that wasn't there before. A breath between arrival and the first note. Not hesitation, more like he's choosing to be present rather than just stepping through the motion. His voice carries differently too. Not diminished. Denser. When he holds a note, it feels less like a technique and more like reluctance to release it. As if letting go requires a decision. He's not trying to be the man he was. That's evident. No chasing, no proving. Just showing up as he is. And the audience, older now, weathered in their own ways, meets him exactly there. Women who still remember the first time they heard him, who they were beside, what it meant in a moment that never entirely faded. That connection didn't disappear. It just grew into something else. Sam Moore has passed away at 89. And for anyone who knows what soul music felt like when it was truly alive, not just heard, but felt in the chest, this one is different. The announcement came from those near him. No spectacle. Just the gentle confirmation that one of the last authentic voices of that generation is no longer here. If you were listening in the 1960s, Sam and Dave don't leave you. Soul Man, hold on, I'm coming. These weren't just popular songs, they were events. Music that changed the temperature of a room, that poured out of radios and made ordinary moments feel charged with something larger. Moore's voice had a forward momentum to it. Urgent, unvarnished, like it was always arriving somewhere important. Alongside Dave Prater, what they created on stage was combustible, real heat, real tension, real joy. That was the Stax Records era. Memphis horns, locked-in rhythm sections, music that held both celebration and sorrow in the same breath. Sam Moore was at the center of it. Offstage, the road was harder. Personal battles, years where things came close to unraveling. But he found his footing again, more than once, and that persistence meant something. People who knew him in later years spoke about a kind of resilience that wasn't performance, a man who had seen both sides of the life and chosen to keep moving forward regardless. And when you put the needle down and actually listen now, that voice doesn't feel like history. It cuts right through, not as a relic, but as something still fully, undeniably alive.